Hey, before you do anything else, I want you to think about something. Think about the way you make your bed in the morning. Or don't. Think about whether you bite your nails when you're nervous, or tap your foot during a stressful meeting, or reach for something sweet when the day feels heavy. Think about whether you read before bed, or scroll your phone, or sleep with the TV on. Now, here's the question I want to sit with today. Where did those habits come from? Because here's what most people don't realize. A huge chunk of who you are right now, your default behaviors, your emotional reactions, your stress responses, your relationship patterns, were quietly being programmed into your brain before you even turned 12 years old. And I don't mean that in a scary, deterministic way. I mean it in the most fascinating, hopeful, and kind of wild way possible. Because once you understand the science of how childhood habits shape the brain, you start to understand yourself at a completely different level. So let's get into it. Section 1. The brain is being built in real time. Okay, so first things first. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside a child's brain, because it is genuinely one of the most spectacular things in nature. When a baby is born, they have roughly 100 billion neurons, about the same number as an adult. But here's the key difference. Those neurons are barely connected. In the first few years of life, the brain starts forming synaptic connections, the pathways that allow neurons to talk to each other at an absolutely insane rate. We're talking about 1 million new neural connections per second in early childhood. Per second. That's not a typo. And as the child moves through their environment, interacts with caregivers, plays, fails, learns, gets scared, gets comforted, those experiences start to shape which connections get reinforced and which ones get pruned away. This is called synaptic pruning, and it's essentially the brain editing itself based on lived experience. Here's the beautiful, terrifying part. The habits a child forms during this period aren't just behaviors, they are literally architecture. They are the wiring of the brain. Repeated actions and experiences carve out neural highways that become easier and easier to travel until eventually they feel automatic, effortless, default. Neuroscientists call this experience dependent plasticity. The brain is plastic, meaning it changes shape based on what it repeatedly experiences. And childhood is when that plasticity is at its absolute peak. Dr. Jack Shonkoff at Harvard's Center on the Developing Child describes early childhood as a sensitive period where the foundations for cognitive function, emotional regulation, and social behavior are all being laid simultaneously. Miss the window and you're not stuck. But rewiring takes significantly more effort as an adult. The highway is already built. You're working against momentum. Section 2. How habits actually get baked in. Now let's talk about the mechanism. How do habits actually get embedded? The short answer is repetition plus reward. Your brain has a structure called the basal ganglia. It's deep, ancient, and incredibly powerful. This is the part of your brain that handles habit formation. When you do something repeatedly, especially when it produces a reward, even a tiny one, the basal ganglia starts to automate that sequence. It takes it off the conscious decision shelf and moves it to the just do it shelf. In adults, this process takes weeks of consistent repetition. In children, whose brains are in overdrive, this process happens much faster. And it doesn't require grand, dramatic experiences. It requires repetition. Think about a kid who grows up in a household where the dinner table is a place of warmth, family talks, laughter, connection. Every night, that context is associated with safety and belonging. The basal ganglia starts to encode communal eating equals comfort and safety. Fast forward 30 years, and that person genuinely feels soothed by a shared meal in a way they can't fully explain. That's not sentiment, that's neuroscience. Now flip it. Think about a child who grows up eating alone or in a tense environment where meals are unpredictable. The basal ganglia encodes eating equals isolation or stress. That person might find themselves eating in front of screens to self soothe, or emotionally overeating, or feeling profound discomfort at formal dinner settings, again, without being able to fully articulate why. The habit formed, the brain built the road. And here's what makes this even more layered. Children don't just form habits through their own actions, they form habits through observation. The mirror neuron system, a network of neurons that fires both when you do something and when you watch someone else do it, is extraordinarily active in childhood. Kids are essentially running a continuous simulation of the adults around them, and their brains are encoding those patterns as templates. So, a parent who handles stress by going for a walk is teaching a habit. A parent who handles stress by pouring a drink is also teaching a habit, and neither of them may ever say a single word about it. Section 3. The habits that matter most. All right, so which childhood habits have the biggest impact on the adult brain? Let's break down a few of the heavy hitters. 1. Sleep habits. This one is foundational in every sense of the word. During childhood and adolescence, the brain does enormous amounts of consolidation during sleep, processing memories, clearing waste products, regulating emotional circuits. Kids who develop consistent, healthy sleep habits, regular bedtimes, dark rooms, wind down routines, are literally giving their brains better quality processing time. Research out of the University of Colorado found that children with irregular sleep schedules showed measurable differences in brain development, particularly in areas governing attention and impulse control. 2. Reading. When a child reads regularly, they're not just accumulating knowledge, they're building and strengthening white matter, the brain tissue that connects different regions and allows for complex, integrated thinking. Studies using brain imaging have shown that kids who read for pleasure demonstrate stronger connectivity between language areas, visual processing areas, and areas governing comprehension. That connectivity doesn't just support literacy, it supports thinking itself. 3. Physical activity. Exercise in childhood does something remarkable to the brain. It increases the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially fertilizer for neurons. BDNF promotes the growth of new neural connections and supports the survival of existing ones. Physically active kids tend to have larger hippocampal volumes, and the hippocampus, if you'll remember, is your brain's memory and learning center. Active kids aren't just healthier, they are neurologically wealthier. 4. Emotional expression and regulation. This is perhaps the most consequential and the most overlooked. Children who are taught, explicitly or implicitly, to name their emotions, to tolerate discomfort, and to seek connection when distressed, develop more robust prefrontal cortex function. The prefrontal cortex is your brain's CEO. It handles decision-making, impulse control, and the ability to pause before reacting. Kids who aren't taught emotional regulation, whether through neglect, dismissal of their feelings, or chronic stress, often develop a nervous system that defaults to reactivity. The amygdala stays on high alert, and that wiring follows them into adulthood. Section 4. The stress variable. We have to talk about stress, because stress in childhood doesn't just affect mood, it literally reshapes brain structure. Researchers use the term adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, to describe things like abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, poverty, and witnessing violence. The landmark ACE study, conducted by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente, followed over 17,000 people and found that childhood trauma has a profound and lasting effect on long-term health, physical and mental. But here's the neuroscience behind it. When a child is under chronic stress, their body produces elevated levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. In short bursts, cortisol is fine, even useful. It sharpens focus and mobilizes energy. But when it's constantly elevated, it becomes toxic to the developing brain. Chronically elevated cortisol has been shown to literally shrink the hippocampus, the region responsible for memory and learning. It also keeps the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, in a state of hyperactivation. The result is a nervous system that is primed for danger, even when there is none. Hypervigilance, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, trouble with trust. And here's the important nuance. Stress alone doesn't cause this. Buffered stress, stress in the presence of a supportive caregiver, actually builds resilience. It teaches the brain that discomfort is survivable. It's unbuffered stress, stress without support, that causes the lasting damage. The presence or absence of a safe adult is arguably one of the most powerful variables in childhood brain development. Section 5, but here's the hopeful part. I promised you hope, so here it is. The brain is never, ever done changing. Neuroplasticity doesn't stop at 12, it doesn't stop at 25. It's with you your entire life. It just requires more intentional effort as you get older. The highways are built, yes, but you can build new ones. You can take different roads. And over time, with repetition, the same mechanism that embedded those childhood habits, you can forge new patterns. Therapy, especially somatic and trauma informed therapy, works precisely because it leverages neuroplasticity to reroute old patterns. Mindfulness meditation has been shown to physically thicken the prefrontal cortex and shrink the reactive amygdala. Exercise continues to produce BDNF into old age. Reading keeps white matter dense and connected. Sleep continues to consolidate and heal. You are not a prisoner of your childhood wiring. You are someone who has the power to understand it and to do something about it. Understanding why you react the way you do, why certain situations feel overwhelming, why certain habits feel impossible to break. That understanding is the first step to rewiring because you cannot change a road you can't see. Section 6, what this means for parents and for you. If you're a parent watching this or thinking about becoming one, I want to offer a reframe. You don't have to be a perfect parent. You don't need a structured enrichment schedule or the right educational toys or a spotless routine. What your child's brain needs most is you, present, warm, responsive, and regulated. A parent who can name their own emotions and recover from mistakes models exactly the neural template a child needs to develop resilience. You don't have to be their everything. You just have to be enough, consistently enough, often enough. And if you're watching this as an adult who had a hard childhood, I want to say this directly to you. The fact that you're curious about how your brain works is already an act of healing. Self awareness is the beginning of neurological change. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose the new road instead of the familiar one, every time you reach out for connection instead of shutting down, you are literally building new architecture. The brain you have is not your final brain. It never was. So let's bring this home. Childhood habits shape the brain through the mechanics of repetition, reward, and neural wiring. The experiences we have and don't have during those critical early years create the default settings of our adult minds. Our stress responses, our emotional patterns, our relationship templates, all of it has roots in a time most of us can barely remember. But understanding those roots changes everything. Because once you see the pattern, you can start to work with it or against it intentionally. Don't forget subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications.